Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
Mark Dallimore, co-founder and CRO of a business called Continuous Software. We're largely based in Ireland, the UK, and Turkey, Istanbul, where we have an R&D development team. We make a really cool piece of software, which hopefully we're going to get a chance to talk about during this conversation. I found my way here through a variety of different startups, vast majority of which have been in the US and have wanted to grow internationally, rest of world, etc., etc. So it's been a long journey, as the grey hairs will give away, but also one that has enabled me to learn and really experience a lot of different individuals and cultures and business tactics and things over the years that I've really enjoyed. And I've been a bit of a sponge along the journey to take different nuggets away and think, yeah, I'll apply that in the future. And now we're at a point where back into startup land, wanting to take a technology product to market. Our project is called is called Engine, and it's a very important problem that we're solving. And I'm very, very, very passionate about how to bring that to market, how to develop that opportunity and those conversations within different nationalities and different cultures and just different parts of the world, really. And I always go into the meetings where I feel that there's no such thing as a bad idea. So, it's always good to put things on the table, and I've always sort of led with that kind of conversation, and I found myself in a variety of different startups that have been acquired by big businesses, multi-thousand people businesses, but I really enjoy building something, and that's critical for me, is really that process of building something. But my journey got me to this point over the period of many years. And as I say, 20 plus years in technology, probably more than that, in fact, now, and seen all sorts of things develop along the way. I think when I joined LinkedIn, for example, I was in the hundreds when I first signed up to LinkedIn, and now I see that as an incredible platform, and same with Facebook and all these other solutions that are out there. And I am a bit of a tech geek, and I do enjoy solving problems and problems that customers, prospects, partners need to solve. And I think that that's something that, as someone involved in a startup, you've got to be passionate about what you're solving, find the gap and solve it, and really, really talk about it in such a way that people can understand you very quickly in terms of what you're going to solve.
Good introduction. And thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate it. Because I know you're a busy guy and you've been flying around all over the place and doing all sorts. And you've been very accommodating today with my tardiness too, which I appreciate.
We all have days like that. Don't worry, it's all good.
Yeah. I got a good excuse, I think.
Very good.
Yeah, startup conference. That's a good excuse.
Very good. Perfect.
Yeah. At least that's the excuse I'm sticking to. So yeah, super interesting journey. Like you said, you've been involved in the startup scene for in one capacity or another for over 20 years. So talk me through that. Like what got you into all of this in the first place? Like were you super young when you kind of first found your interest in? I assume back then it would have been IT, right? Because for me that's what it was. It was that's the way it was framed. It was IT. Was that the case, or was it something that you came across a bit later on? Like what sparked all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting the way that the whole IT society has developed from Big Blue in the shape of IBM and lots of other technology solutions to businesses now that are squarely focused on a niche or a problem or a space. And I think that develops, it's amazing to hear you going to this startup conference, because I think that develops a fresh economy that gives you an opportunity to really laser focus on a problem that exists. We can all talk about Uber, or we can all talk about Facebook, we can talk about these products that really answer a particular problem. But at some point, someone sat back and thought, do you know what? That's a problem. I need to solve that.
Mm.
And you and I and thousands of us don't think twice about, getting an Uber now or a
Yeah.
free now. Depends on where we are in the world, right? And all these other different versions of Uber. I won't call them copies. I just think they're different iterations of
Mm.
a problem that exists. And I think there's room for everybody, and there's always room
Oh,
for
100%.
competition.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important part of how technology has grown now. And
Mm.
we all sat back and you know sat back in awe on Sunday and watched that rocket land on the top of where it just took off from, went up
Mm.
to space and came back down again, and landed with pinpoint accuracy. And tip your hat to the guys writing the code behind that. That's kind of
Well, all
like,
of it, right? I mean, the code, the engineering,
it's
the people designing
phenomenal.
the materials, like it's. I mean, it's a city of people that must be
It's
behind
incredible.
projects like that. It's
And
insane.
think about how we watch it. We
Yeah.
watch it on a
Yeah.
live stream on our phones
Yeah.
or on our laptops or whatever it might be.
Mm.
And we have to pinch ourselves for a moment and think that has happened
Yeah.
20
I
years?
I love that you're saying this, because I'm like, I can tell we're kindred spirits like this in terms of being sort of kind of geeky, geeky about
Yeah, yeah,
tech, because I'll sit there and I'll be thinking all of this, and
yes.
usually there's no one else around me. I can say, hey, isn't it fucking incredible? And they're just like, yeah, well, so what? Like, like, shut up.
Yeah, it's the
So
chug shoulder moment, isn't it? And you're like,
yeah,
do you not realize how hard
exactly.
that is?
Yeah, all of
That's
it, like every
And
single
then
part of it. Yeah.
there was a beautiful video on LinkedIn that was circulating yesterday or whenever.
Mm.
And it was a guy who was actually there
Oh wow.
at the lakeside, at the shore side in Texas.
Mm.
And I mean, the perspective with which that he'd taken this video. Now, that was the one thing I wanted to bring up, was the perspective was the fact that he was actually using a handheld mobile device to record this thing coming back down from space. So there's point number one, right? We couldn't do that not 20 years ago.
Mm.
Impossible. We would have to take various devices. But yeah, as a good photographer said to me once, he said, I said to him, "What's the best camera I can buy?" "It's the one you've got with you." And it's incredible to watch this kind of these all of this is driven by technology. That person is taking that video, and the perspective that they put on it was completely different to the live stream from SpaceX, because they were seeing it from a distance. You could see the air bubbling when it was doing the firing of the rockets to slow it down, the speed at
Well,
which it came in.
it probably made you feel like you were there
You were there.
that little bit
It's
more, as opposed to
immersive.
a produced kind of a camera angle. It's a bit like I'm a bit of a movie nerd as well, and films like Pacific Ring. Is that what it's called? Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim. I don't know if you've seen it, but
Yes.
it's all big monsters and big robots,
Yes.
and they very purposely filmed it from the ground, like you do
Yeah.
quite often with big kaiju type movies, to make people
Yeah.
feel like you're on the ground. It's that kind of thing. It
Yeah.
just sort of creates a psychological connection to the person who's actually filming the thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is very similar. That he literally, who kudos to the person that did it, because he or she
Mm.
caught it from a distance and saw. So you see the sonic boom, you see the little ripples come off the sonic, and because I'm a bit of a geek, I'm like, wow, that's amazing in itself. So I must have watched that 6 times,
Mm.
and I was like, this is incredible. And then just to put it back on the launch pad and the chopsticks, as they call them, catch it. It's just incredible. And that's kind of like, that's way out there. That's solving a problem of not only moving us to different planets, um, but also moving us around the same planet in the future at a much different pace than is available to us right now with a standard Rolls-Royce engine. So, ultimately, I think there's some really interesting things that are on the horizon, and that's just one example of where technology can take us as a society. And I think that's something that's we just take it for granted. I mean, the stuff that we take for granted now is just phenomenal. Um, Music, we can have thousands and thousands and thousands, millions of albums just in the palm of our hand, and long have the days gone of popping down to HMV or Virgin Records and flicking through. Right?
Yeah, it's so funny. On the drive back at like 2 a.m. this morning, I was listening to my classical essentials
Yeah,
playlist, right, on Spotify in the car, in my, in a fairly new, in a pretty new Mercedes, all the technology and stuff. I just couldn't help but thinking, I wonder what the original composers of these these songs would make of the
yeah,
way in which I'm digesting their music currently. Would they be horrified that I'm not giving it the attention it deserves? I was even thinking, like, some real, classical music fans, how would they
yeah,
feel about the fact that I'm listening to it like that versus, I don't know, in a
yeah,
hall, like whatever, and what would they make of it? Like the fact that I'm just
yeah,
I'm just streaming, 3 hours worth of classical music from,
yeah. It's
throughout,
incredible.
a 200-300 year period, like
Phenomenal,
just
isn't it? When
on
you
my
think about
drive
what we're
down.
doing, and
Yeah,
it's ones and zeros. We've
yeah.
compressed it down to ones and zeros, and we've made it possible and palatable to put it in our car.
Mm,
Anybody that's watching should check out a show on ITV called Joan. Putting to one side the storyline, it's
mm,
all set in the 80s.
yeah.
Now I've just finished watching this mini series on ITV for those from the UK, and it's really cool. It's got the young girl Sophie Turner, I think her name is, who played one of the main characters in Game of Thrones. And it's all set in the 80s, and anyone that wants an 80s soundtrack, number one, watch this show because it's brilliant. You'll be tapping your feet and singing along to all the songs. It's brilliant soundtrack, well chosen.
Mm,
But also you can see the difference between that society and this society. It's
mm,
phenomenal to watch. And it got me thinking when I was coming to the last episode how much technology has changed what we do on a day-to-day basis. Just they shot it beautifully and brilliantly in such a way that there were no exposures to modern technology. Sometimes these shows that want to transport you back to a different era struggle with that. They deserve some plaudits and awards for the way they shot this thing, because it's everything from the furniture to the phones and everything. And it just got me thinking, wow, that's 19 set in the 80s, so that's 40 years ago.
mm. Yeah.
That's not even a blink of an eye when it comes to the planet. That's
It,
just starting moving the eyelid. It's
and
nothing at all.
they refer to movies and TV shows based set in the 80s now as period
Exactly,
pieces.
exactly,
Like, I
exactly.
remember
And
I remember when that was like stuff set in Victorian area, like,
it's
and
a
now
scary thought,
it's
right?
stuff set in the 80s. Yeah, which
Yeah,
is terrifying. But yeah, no, I
yeah,
mean, that aesthetic's become quite popular now, isn't it, amongst pop culture, the
yeah,
80s aesthetic. But it's
yeah.
pretty I what was it that I watched? And this is going back a lot further, but there was
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
one of the Final Destination movies. Sorry, this is a completely random
Yeah, yeah,
sidetrack, but you'll get used to this for the next couple
sure.
of hours. One of the Final Destinations movies was a secret prequel. All right, so you thought it was a
Oh, very
continuation, but
cool.
actually it was a prequel. And the way that they did that was they very purposely just didn't include any technology. Like, they never showed anyone's mobile phone coming out or this, that, and the other. So you had no idea of what the time period was, but it was actually set in like the early 90s or something like that,
Very cool.
or 80s.
Yeah.
And they completely tricked you, and then then it led into the very first movie, which is but anyway, that's a complete random thing.
But don't
But yeah,
you think we now live in a society of the art of possible?
oh,
Really, we've
100%. Yeah.
got to that point where we think, right, what's the next challenge? We're just talking about SpaceX. You
Mm,
think about the next challenge, the next thing that we need to do, the drive towards EV, the drive towards, planet ecological, the situation that we find ourselves in, and how we can use green tech and different aspects of the technology industry. Software eats itself, right? It's a
mm,
phenomenal thing. It grows. It morphs itself into something else and something else and something else. I mean, we've kind of gone from these big ownership cultures to individual applications that we can now have on our MacBook or whatever device we use, and then our iPhones and our Androids. And it's brilliant. It's amazing when you think about it, because it can create this environment that we can all benefit from and grow into. And I'm not going to suggest that every problem can be solved by technology. There's lots of things that can't, but it's an amazing opportunity for humankind to continue to grow and develop, and look at the leaps and bounds we're making between the 60s, the 80s, the early 2000s, and now this early part, second quarter of the century, where we're heading into 25 next year. I mean, it's phenomenal, the leaps and bounds that we're making, and we seem to be compressing that time frame as well with regards to the growth that we're making. And
Yeah.
we're sitting here talking about capturing a rocket,
Well,
and then
Moore's law, right? I mean, it's just
yeah,
and indistinguishable from magic, right? Arthur C. Clarke. I mean, it's and one thing I think that Arthur C. Clarke probably got slightly wrong in his assumption about technology and how it would appear to be magic is that I don't think he could have predicted that the actual environment itself feels somewhat like magic, in the sense that as individuals we can will things into existence now. You know what I mean? Like, and anyone can, and that's pretty much anyone can. There is some elements of that, obviously, depending on your location in the world, that may make it far more difficult than others. But in general principle, anyone, if they really, really want to, they can will something that doesn't exist into existence in order to solve, like you said, a problem or a specific set of problems. Like that is definitely
this
magic.
kind of guides me back to your original question.
Yes,
why startups?
I completely forgot about my original question.
we feel like two comedians that are rambling now off in the distance. I used to love watching Billy Connolly do that. Go for 20 minutes, and then he just came back. Oh yeah, and it would be like, wow, that's incredible.
Pretty much the format of this show.
But the thing about startups is being able to get a customer to believe you and trust you and go on that journey with you as well, especially when you're at the bleeding edge. When you have an early stage startup, which we do, you have a product that you're entrusting to customers to believe in you in terms of come on that journey with us. You don't have the brand name, you don't have the marketing budget of a Microsoft or you name it, another big organization, but you have the passion and the belief that you can resolve a challenge that we believe, and we solve a problem called strategic portfolio planning, which talks about taking all project work up and putting it into our product, which is called Engine. An Engine then gives you the best possible outcome from all of those projects. And if you ask it a question, and you look at a risk or a measure or a change that you want to make to your portfolio, the maths gets to work in the algorithm, and within the click of a button, it brings that answer back to you and says, actually, this is now the best possible scenario for all of that work that you've got planned. And it's a really interesting challenge, because most people try and do that in Excel right now. And what we're trying to do is go toe to toe with that conversation. Actually, look, there's a much better way of doing this. Here's an application that we're incredibly proud of. Come on that journey with us. We'll help you. And that's really where I think some folk thrive and some folk don't thrive in that environment, because you've got to be so committed and you've got to be so forthright, with respect, of course, forthright in your views on how this is going to help that customer, how this is going to change and rock the world of that prospect. And we're just at the very early stages of Geoffrey Moore's bell curve. We have early adopters. We're probably at zero in terms of the adoption path, but ultimately, we're extremely passionate about this problem. It exists globally. We're using all that technology around us to deliver it, and that's really coming back to that initial question. That's why startups are different. That's why you have to take the good with the bad. Sometimes you've got to brush yourself down, and it's not for everybody. I think there's always a word of caution there. but ultimately bringing you to a place where you get in front of that customer and you nail it. There's nothing better than nailing it. And they're not buying you because of your brand name. They're buying you because of the passion and the solution that you bring into the room for a problem that you know you can solve.
Ideally, yeah, exactly.
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a fine line, isn't it? Like, you know, with on so many aspects of the things you said, but one in particular that stood out, which is, you know, the tenacity, I guess, the determination that you need to bring to your solution, you know, in terms of being like, no, we're sure, we're certain, if we keep going down this path. But it's such a fine line in the sense that you also need to, you know, be very cautious that you're not entirely wedded to that, to the point that, you know, you're not going to take criticism, you're not going to take feedback, you're not prepared to pivot, and, you know, and all that. And it's very difficult sometimes to know, for founders to know, you know, when it's time to cut their losses on something, or you know, or look at a different path. You know, it isn't easy, you know, because I've worked with founders before, you know, where they were told no by hundreds, thousands of people, and those people were wrong. Like, and anyone else would say, like, you're crazy. Like, everyone's telling you this is a bad idea, and they're like, no, they're wrong. Like, you know, these founders were nuts. Like, the balls that you have to do that is incredible. But, you know, because for most founders, we say go and get feedback and pivot accordingly. So it's difficult. It is very, very difficult.
I think maybe in the back of their mind, those founders that you mentioned there that took the nose on the chin have plan A, B, C, and D, and
Right.
E, F, G, H, etc. And they have a plan, and they can pivot, and they can go deep. They can keep going deep with the same business principle, potentially with the same product. If they're in the software industry, the same product that they've written and they're committed to. And ultimately having that, and you know the VC scene, TAM, SAM, and SOM, you've got all of that pretty well embedded. But having the team and having the early stage customers, case studies, customers, win stories, and having that, if you're able to draw that out a little bit, I think you're onto something. And then you can do some ticks in the box exercises with, you know, the industry leaders, the analyst firms that exist, and say, we're really onto something here. And I think as you grow and you expand, then growth comes from, you know, the availability of capital to enable you to grow and to talk to more people more of the time. Actually, a really good friend of mine, Steve Elliott, is CEO I used to work with and for. He used to talk about grit and grind. He was a good Texan guy. He was the CEO of Agilecraft, and he talked about grit and grind as, you know, key narratives, key points that I think got some posters made up of those with some appropriate design. And it's true, you have to grit, you have to have grit, and you have to grind it out, and determination. But you also have to pivot. To your point there, Greg, the way you talked about pivot and pivot and persevere. So I think it's kind of like two things side by side, taking on that feedback, thinking, right, do I have traction? How did I get that traction? But also, let me get some feedback and understand, you know, what do we do next? What's the next stage of our journey? And whatever those chunks look like, can be months, can be years, and being able to then push, but also create the pull at the same time. It's so difficult for startups to create pull, i.e. inbounds. It's so you've got to create that push out in the market, talking to the right people, you know, foots in doors and things like that, with respect, of course, you know, and honoring people's time and making sure you're qualifying correctly. But I think grit and grind is two very important attributes that folks need to have in the startup community.
Yeah, I mean, grit and grind are probably the two main attributes that I know most investors in my network are continuously looking for, you know, in a founder or founding team. 100%. You know, because, you know, within that there's resilience and there's all the other, you know, all the other things you described. So yeah, 100%. So Talk me through then. Did you actually answer my question? I don't even remember about what got you, what sparked your interest in technology in the first place. I mean, when you
Yeah,
were a kid, when you were a teenager. I mean,
yeah.
did you study at university, at college, or at school? Like, what was the
No,
entry point into?
none of the above. I went to the
Okay,
University of Life,
right,
and had a very interesting journey into technology via music.
right. Okay,
Um,
interesting.
so yeah, many eons ago, I was in the music industry,
Mm,
and it was just when things were turning a little bit more digital,
mm,
late 80s, early 90s. And then there were things like click tracks and drum machines and then things like I was into percussion and drumming at the time,
mm,
still am, and uh, that kind of led me down a path of, oh, I wonder how they do that. How do they build that? How do they build that drum machine, or how does that work, and how do they build that all together? And it just got me. It sparked. Was inquisitive really in
mm,
terms of where I would take my experience there. So once that kind of came to its conclusion, I sort of found my way into. I call actually. I think I went to a presentation at Apple in the UK, near Stockley Park, or I think they still are Stockley Park near Heathrow, and kind of just got onto this. Wow, that's and Apple has always been part of my life in terms of their technology. I've always enjoyed what the products they build and the different iterations of the business that we've seen, how they've developed over the years. I think from them, so going way back, it would have been the advent of synthesizers and that kind of aspect of digital music, running through from no 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 19 and things like that in the 80s, and then running through and figuring out how that was all written, and then as a musician trying to apply that to my drum kit, with the triggers and 808 drop basses and things like that, that I built onto my kit at the time, and it kind of got me into that whole. This is fascinating, and then technology was just really there was no Google. It was blink of an eye at that point. The internet was a thing, but it was always been around it. I've always been around email and the first iterations of the search engines of this world. Ask Jeeves. I don't know if you remember that one, Yahoo and things like that. And then
yeah.
watching them disappear as Google went on to dominate that particular sector.
Mm,
Um, so I think it came right from my early stages of succeeding in the music life and seeing that develop and thinking, okay, where can this go? And then being on the periphery and picking up positions here and there and sales positions, and getting back in the 90s, getting Xerox training, sales training, all the classic capabilities to think about qualification, BAMF, need analysis, things of that nature, to really give me those raw skills. And then you hone that over time, and you develop your persona and your approach to customers and prospects, and then just seeing things. I think just being lucky, I suppose, very, very lucky to spend a lot of time in the States, spend a lot of time in Silicon Valley, seeing things develop, met some really, really interesting people very early. I remember walking through the doors at the very early stages of Salesforce.com and the LinkedIn building in Mountain View and things like that, and just seeing these different, and that's just a different environment altogether.
mm,
If anyone gets a chance to spend time in the valley, it's a fantastic place. Real estate is off the scale. I mean, it's so expensive, but
mm,
it's interesting to watch. And I've been there many times over the years, um, and watched different things develop. But I think it was really the very early stages for me. And I think where the spark came was, I was always a bit of a geek, is the wrong word. I think it's overused phrase, but I was always really interested in that kind of technology conversation that kind of stemmed itself from music and then that then turned into data, and then data is now turned into all the tracks that we have and you have in your car on the way back last night. And it's kind of this evolution that we've gone on, that's now led us to where we are. Data is the new oil.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
It exists in every business, in every person's life. Some of it we can control, some of it we can't control. Our digital footprint grows year on year on year, and it's how we use that data for good and bad. I think is a very important part of society now. But I think for me, really, going back to those early music days and watching that first Roland digital drum kit, and I was like, wow, how does that work? How's that producing sound? I mean, that's just pads. I mean, how do you make that work? So I think it just sparked something in me that just went on that journey, and 30 plus years later, still fascinated just by rockets landing on top of launch pads. I think that's kind of just who you become or who you are. It's lights a spark in you, and you think, oh, okay, that's really fascinating. How does that work?
I think my exposure to technological changes that kind of really captured my imagination for to lead me into where I am now, similarly to you, was also in music and the music industry, but less so, I think, originating from the hardware side of it, but more directly from the software.
Right.
Maybe because I was born a little later. I don't know, but and that was primarily from seeing the rise and fall of things like Napster and so on. But then working in live music venues at the time, and then seeing the introduction of MySpace, and MySpace played a really critical role early on for musicians. So tons of bands and solo artists, and I was using that to book a lot of the artists, and there was that change that happened while I was running live music venues at the time, where it went from people sending in physical demos on CD to then just everyone just sending you the digital tracks on MySpace, and then the change there, and then the full democratization of the music industry, of where instead of, I remember my very first band, we had to go into a recording studio, we had to pay an enormous amount of money, and we had to get our demo recorded, and it was a full 2 days, and we slept there, and it was we were trying to squeeze every penny out of every minute that we could, and because it was costing us an arm and a leg and all that. And then a few years later, everyone's recording it in their bedrooms, and it was incredible. And it was just incredible to see that the wave of talent that the world could get exposed to all of a sudden, because of that democratization and the creativity that was suddenly unlocked in people, just doing it in their living room or bedroom or whatever. It was just insane.
I think there's a couple of things that make me slightly sad about that, though. There are things there. So that community, you kind of, being in that band spirit, you love and hate each other within a split second.
But that still exists. That still exists. That's never gone away.
Yeah, true.
It was more for solo artists, producers, and things like that.
True.
I mean, obviously, especially when you see that, the rise of like urban music, for example, hip hop, and then electronic music, even like drum and bass and EDM and all of that. I mean, that suddenly became a much more accessible thing versus using these very analog, huge bits of machinery, and hardware to try and synthesize these sounds. Whatever it might be. Even just a kid being able to afford a really good synthesizer or set of synthesizers to create whatever it was, jungle music, drum and bass, whatever it was in the in the 80s and 90s. Like these aren't cheap pieces, tools.
No.
Right? And then suddenly you can have an electronic synthesizer on your mum's PC in the living room, and it's like,
and then you can roar to huge worldwide fame by creating an amazing piece of work like Billie Eilish did with her brother, and off they go, and from a back bedroom, right? It's just incredible, and the quality of the recording is phenomenal. But there's two things I miss. Number one is holding a photograph, physically holding a photograph, and kind of like, because they're all on our phones now and in the cloud. And the other is true. I was at a conference last week, and I was watching a guy on the decks, and they got digital decks now, haven't they? And there's not. I know some guys are still doing it with vinyl, but it's like, oh, that's a shame. That's I know there's a rise of vinyl and what have you, and it's been going for a couple of years now. But actually watching someone mix wherever, whatever club it might be in town, it's an art form. And then they've got the digital decks now that they do it with. I a couple of things that just hearing you
No, I
speak
agree.
there
I agree.
made me think about that.
That I used to be, which was going to sound, it's going to really sound kind of cringe now what I say it to the world, but I used to be very heavily involved in the UK hip hop scene as a kid, and I used to beatbox and stuff like that. It was another era, and but they're vinyl purists, right?
Yeah.
And so there are a few scenes that you can go to where they will refuse to DJ on anything but vinyl, which is great to see. But
That's
then
cool.
like this event last night I went to, they had a DJ, and I say DJ, it was a laptop and digital decks. I'm just like, I didn't see her once use the actual decks. It's like, okay, you've got the auto mix function, and that's there for show. Like, let's be honest.
I mean, that art form in queuing up, when you watched a real DJ queuing up the next track and nailing it spot on, that's brings a warm
and
warm
even
feeling
like
in my heart.
the scratching and sometimes bringing something in and then bringing it back again, and it's just there's I mean some of those scratch DJs are mesmerizing.
Incredible.
Absolutely. It's a friend of mine was really amazing at it, and I asked him time and time again to explain to me how it worked, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it.
That's pretty cool. I mean, it's amazing when you see someone that is that talented and has that skill and ability, whether they're a founder, whether they're a visionary, whether they're a musician. It's very cool. It's privileged. It's a privilege to be in the same room and to share that experience with somebody. And it's kind of like, that goes back to being a sponge. I love to sponge those moments. I don't know if that's a thing, but just really absorb what's happening, because we're back into that society, aren't we, where we pick the phone up and we video, and it's like, that's really nice just to watch and feel it. And music is very well, for me, is very, can be very, very inspiring on many different levels, whether it's rock or whether it's rap or whether it's opera. It's to be admired. But I think
I went amazing. A few months back, and it was really great because they said no phones out. We will give you a very specific moment during the show where you can take some photos for 5 minutes, and then that's it. And it was like midway point. I think they did it, and then right at the end they did it. But for the whole show, and it was so nice to just be sat in a room of people watching and enjoying the moment all together, as a large group of people.
That's nice.
And not seeing a single one of these up in the air.
That's great.
We need to do more of that, I think.
Yes. I was at a restaurant recently in the Middle East. It was a Japanese restaurant, and it had a lead-lined box on the table that you had to put your phone in, and none of us did it, by the way, which is our bad, because everything buzzes, doesn't it? And the lead-lined box stops your watch buzzing or whatever you might be wearing at the time, your smartwatch. Actually, just come back to the music theme here. On that trip, I was able to watch. I was in Saudi. I was able to watch a traditional music being played, and I was just mesmerized by this, and it got me back to the where this all started conversation. It's the music conversation, but this was pure. This was traditional instruments. This was traditional singing, and in Arabic, and it was just fantastic just to sit there and go, okay, I'm not getting my phone out. I did take 10 seconds of shot, and then I was like, okay, put it away, just watch it. And it got me back to where a lot of things started for me, actually, in that whole experience of watching music develop. But this was very, very pure. And I think that comes back to that whole startup world, when you carry your bag and you get an opportunity to experience these other cultures and take your solution to them. It's a privilege. It's a great opportunity to really as with our product, solve a problem that exists regardless of where you might be on our planet. And it's and you get these moments, and you think, it kind of sliding doors moment, no, wrong expression, but it just takes you back, and you think, oh yeah, this is amazing. I just need to be a musician for a moment here. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good. It was good.
I try and actively avoid taking videos. I've
Yeah.
noticed, if I'm in a moment of something, I just I need a quick photo, and then that's it.
Yeah.
So snap back to it. That's how I try and stay in the moment, but also, do my duties for LinkedIn.
I took the video
Yeah.
because I wanted to hear it again. If that makes sense.
With music, I was
like, I've never really heard that up close and personal. That kind of, it was, I don't want to say Bedouin, but it was kind of like that kind of tribal sound. And you could imagine yourself being in the desert somewhere. As it was, I was in the middle of Riyadh, but you can imagine yourself being in a desert somewhere and hearing someone just pick up the various instruments and just play what was something very, very traditional. And I just wanted to get 10, 15 seconds of that so I could listen to it again and sort of deconstruct it and think, oh, that's very cool. And that comes back to that building philosophy and building something, is that I think as a musician, you understand the different layers inside a piece of music.
What are the components that make this evoke this feeling, etc.? It's like, trying to reverse engineer human emotion almost, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that kind of rolls itself into kind of the whole business community. It's trying to understand the emotions that might support or not support you being successful in a particular transaction or a particular relationship with a customer. I think you can try and break that down a little bit and try to really deal with it at a very human level, and really appeal to that individual at a sort of very human level. And I love to, as I said earlier on in this conversation, it's about building something that doesn't exist now and something that we can solve together. I mean, talking about that piece of music, I've never heard, obviously in the distance, I've heard something like that before, but not up close and personal. And then you kind of break it down and think, oh, that's very cool. I like the way that's put together.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said there about the human level of technologies. I mean, that's very much what the focus is for my startup, which because I really strongly believe in that and how that ties into data and the future of data and so on. But I'm not here to talk about my startup. We've got a few minutes left before break, so I ask you to do me a favor. Can you elevator pitch? It's Engine, isn't it? Right.
Engine.
Can you give us an elevator pitch for Engine to leave us hanging for part 2? Well, we'll delve into it.
So I'll start my elevator pitch by spelling it. It's AANGINE, engine.com. Anybody that has data in their business at whatever level tries to plan different bodies of work, and we call that a portfolio of work with lots of different projects underneath it. Tries to plan that work in Excel. We want to undo that behavior by a strategic portfolio planning solution that enables that data to come alive. You can ask it questions. You can create change events, and unlike any other technology that exists, have real what-if analysis. So 2 scenarios side by side. What if I make this decision? What if I make that decision? What does it mean? What's my throughput going to look like? What is my output going to look like? There's so many businesses we're running. We've talked in this conversation about how fast we're running with development and technology. There's so many businesses, they're running so fast right now that the push that they get from their C-suite to create outcomes that are tracked back to the strategy of the organization, it's critical to have a piece of software that enables those teams to do effective planning. And that's what we do with Engine. Effective planning means effective outcomes with accelerated and faster delivery cycles. So all of those projects that are in your portfolio, you can have a great view, great visuals into that. Look at the resources, look at the budgets, look at the available time that you have, and really make a difference to your business by saying, actually, if we pull that forwards or we push it out, it's going to make a huge difference to our delivery cycle. And we can model that. And inside our product, we've developed an algorithm. We use AI. We don't lead with AI, but we use AI, we use machine learning to enable us to stay right up to date with current technology trends. And frankly, move those customers away from the reliance upon Excel and make those changes. So if you make those kind of changes in Excel now, it'll take you hours, if not days, to make those changes and then bring it back to the decision cycle. We can do that in seconds.
Good pitch. I mean, who's the, just one last question before we wind down for this part, but
sure.
What's the sort of main target market for Engine then?
Very horizontal in terms of if we were looking at SIC codes, we can run across many different industries, but we've seen success in banking, in the insurance, in the government, in telcos. So, those big sectors, those big digital change agents, organizations that are on digital transformations need to see this data, need to plan more efficiently. And ultimately, that conversation is driven right at the top of those businesses in the C-suite, whether it's the CEO, CIO, CTO, whoever it might be in that group, or C-suite -1. It's really driving the conversation to say, and a lot of this came out of the back of COVID, out of the pandemic, which is a lot of businesses obviously suffered and they compressed and they expanded again and they've compressed again. And ultimately, what our product enables organizations to do is to look at their available capacity, whether it's budget, whether it's people, and ask it questions. So you can ask it to model a 10% increase in headcount. What does that mean for me in terms of delivery and the speed of which I deliver and the priority with which I deliver, and how do I keep that all together? How do I show that on a elegant roadmap that's interactive, that democratizes this planning process?
I've got a ton of questions about it, but we're going to have to wait for part 2, and we'll dive deeper because it's super interesting, and I want to ask about some of the other businesses that you founded, and I believe you had an exit or two as well.
Yeah, along the way. Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll delve into that too. So yeah, we'll call it end of part 1 for now. Okay. So for those listening and watching, thanks very much for joining us, and do check back in a couple of days' time where we'll be continuing on the conversation with Mark. That's end of part 1.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part 2 comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.